All right, everybody, welcome back to second lesson on Earth's history, Unit 5. And today we're going to be discussing life on Earth, early life on Earth, primitive life on Earth. So let's get right to the lesson. Life during the Precambrian, remember Precambrian means everything before the Cambrian period, which we'll be discussing in the next few lessons, evolved from simple one-celled organisms into complex multicellular ones. So we know that life on Earth went from simple to more complex. There's still the simple around, but there's definitely a lot more complex now. And the first evidence of life that we have on Earth are the prokaryotes. These are primitive, one-celled organisms, such as this photograph here, zoomed in on a bacteria cell. And they have no nucleus or cell organelles. They're very primitive. Obviously, they're complex. They can live. But compared to the things you're going to learn about next, they're primitive. And you have lots of these in you right now. Bacteria. And here's some microphotographs of bacteria, different shapes. There's more of these things inside you than there are cells of you inside you. They're just really small. And actually, most of them are necessary for life. They're in your gut. Well, now, one of these prokaryotes we call cyanobacteria. And this was an evolutionary change for Earth because these prokaryotes produced oxygen. They learned how to make energy from sunlight by the process of photosynthesis. So they evolved chlorophyll. And we have found fossils of these as old as 3.5 billion years ago. And you can see in the photographs here, they have a greenish tinge to them. That's the chlorophyll, which converts sunlight into sugar. So you get enough of these things around, and the atmosphere starts to change. And one of the organisms that did that was a colony of these cyanobacteria called stromatolites. And we really call that today blue-green algae. But they added the oxygen to the Earth's atmosphere in great amounts. And you can see a photograph here. This is in Saratoga Springs, New York. We have lots and lots of stromatolite fossils. And there's still some today living. And we'll learn later on in this lesson, actually, some of the evidence of when these things first started really changing the atmosphere. We find rock layers, sedimentary rock layers made under the oceans that didn't have black iron anymore. The iron had been rusted out red, so it's been oxidized. And that indicates an important time period in Earth's atmospheric history. Here's some actual living stromatolites photographed in Shark Bay, Australia. And this is during low tide. And these things here are, alive. They produce oxygen when sunlight hits them, but the tide will cover that and give them nutrients too. And there's another photograph showing stromatolites at low tide. And some rusted red rocks here in the Grand Canyon. You can see oxygen does turn rocks that have iron in them reddish color. Now, the importance of oxygen. Well, as far as life goes, oxygen was actually toxic to many life forms, and it killed them off. But oxygen does allow for a different type of respiration called aerobic respiration, which you and I have. Aerobic respiration unlocks a lot more energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate. You'll see in this photograph down there, the mighty mitochondria, and this is in all of our cells, and it produces energy through respiration. It uses oxygen, and it makes a lot of ATP. This is in contrast to the anaerobic respiration, which is what cells were doing up until this point, before the oxygen-containing atmosphere. And that's much less energy produced from anaerobic respiration. Now, all this oxygen that starts to form into the atmosphere for the first time ever forms our first ozone layer, which is just 3 oxygen molecules. And this ozone is very effective at blocking out ultraviolet radiation. And you can see in the photograph on the right, or the diagram on the right, in the stratosphere, where most of our ozone exists, it filters out ultraviolet radiation, and this allows for new life forms to evolve, life forms that normally would have been damaged or destroyed by the ultraviolet energy coming in through the atmosphere. So this kind of unlocks a whole different progression of evolution. And then come the eukaryotes, which could have been because of this. These are much more complex cells. They have a nucleus, a nice little area to keep the genetic material contained and safe. They have cell organelles, all different kinds of things you probably remember from 7th grade, like Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum and plasma membranes and things that had much more distinctive processes, things that help the cell to advance and evolve and do things that the primitive cells couldn't do, and hopefully unlocked the eventual steps to make living things multicellular. So there's lots of cell organelles there. Here's some microphotographs showing ancient eukaryotic fossils. And then in 1952, Stanley Miller and his buddy Urey, they ran an experiment. They got the idea that, well, if we took the early Earth atmospheric conditions and we made them in a laboratory apparatus, let's see what we get out of this. Maybe we could get something out of this that could be the primitive building blocks of life or even life itself. So they weren't really trying to play God here. They were just, trying to see what would happen. I mean, it's an experiment. And what they did is they boiled some water in the apparatus on the left, and the steam, the water vapor, came up to a chamber filled with some methane, some ammonia, some hydrogen, and some electrodes where they were making what they thought was primitive lightning, early Earth lightning. And they let this thing run for about a week or so, and then they condensed out these gases with a condenser apparatus you'll see there. And those materials that were in that gas chamber cooled off and accumulated into the bottom flask there for chemical analysis. When they sampled it, they found amino acids were formed. And these are the building blocks of life. So this was a revolutionary idea that you could actually make some amino acids from primitive Earth conditions. And we're not sure if the conditions were exactly like this. There's a lot of potential problems with this experiment, but it does show some interesting things. And that is it. So a little bit about life on early Earth.